Those were his words. It's
They
trade.
did trade 3 first-rounders for him.
Yeah. I mean, everything's been leading to this moment when he names him the quarterback in a press conference in late July. But he did. That's what he said.
Yeah, I don't think we necessarily got clarity because it was all leaning this way. But as long as Jimmy Garoppolo is around, and he literally is still around, he was hanging out with the two of them today, it was still somewhat, George Kittle talking about the grizzly versus the silverback gorilla, the elephant in the room, who is elephant's a herbivore, so I wouldn't put that against the meat eaters. I guess technically silverback might
Very
be as well.
smart, know the playbook, spend more than 4 hours in it every week, probably. Elephants don't need to actually read it more than once.
Yeah, I actually think, though, him saying that brings it into more light, and we'll dive into Jimmy of, like, you need to do everything. And Kyle said this, like, we're all in. Like, the team, he said, I'm all in, we're all in, as John's fidgeting around, and most of all, the team's all in. Do you think, he would never admit this, but, like, he spoke to the team as a whole maybe in spring, or he spoke to, like, his individual leaders over the process of the spring leading to this moment about Trey?
I'd be surprised. I hadn't thought about that. It's a good question. I'd be a little surprised if Kyle had, like, brought everybody together and talked about Trey to them.
When I say brought everyone together, I just meant, like, start of a team meeting, like Trey Lance is now our quarterback. Or do you just kind of...
I don't think so. What do you think? I don't think he would have done that.
I think he probably attacks individually the guys he needs to. The Kittles, Juszczyks, Warner, Armstead, and just kind of goes like, you guys, we're all in on this guy. You guys are the leaders of this team. Just kind of help guide him and help guide the locker room, and everyone knows. Because I saw George Kittle was asked, like, have you talked to Jimmy? And we even mentioned this at, like, the Warriors games. Like, George moved on. George said he hasn't spoken to him since, like, the end of the season, or they ran into each other once in Vegas. Somehow Matt LaFleur was also around. But, like, I think they kind of, one thing players, maybe as an like as a rookie, you just got a lot going on. But any veteran player past a couple years, they kind of know the deals, right? If you follow football, it's pretty easy to understand. Like, you draft a wide receiver in the first round, like, that fucking guy's playing. You draft a defensive lineman in the first round, that guy's playing. You draft a quarterback high, let alone trade a bunch of picks for him, it's pretty clear the big picture view on what the deal is, right? Players aren't dumb, because most of these guys, like, if you come from Division I football, a lot of these guys, Iowa, Oregon, SC, whatever, like, it's a pretty big deal when a freshman class comes in. Like, hey, these three guys are pretty good. These guys they've been dealing with replacements. When I say replacements, like people getting replaced on their own team, or other coaches trying to replace them, since, like, their sophomore year in college. Because at one point in time, they're that guy as a freshman. And then from then on out until they're drafted, and unless you're a first-round pick, you're kind of fighting for your lot in land. And once you get it, every single year, they're drafting guys. Like, say, it's clear George Kittle's the best tight end on the team. He's paid that way. But, like, they've drafted a ton of tight ends, right? They draft a ton of defensive linemen. They're constantly – it's the one position that, say what you want about Mike Golick, but he used to get very angry on Mike and Mike about the way quarterbacks are treated like they're untouchable. Every other position is constantly dealing with free agents and positional turnover. And when it does happen with quarterbacks, it's a massive, massive deal, right? The moment Kenny Pickett is drafted in the first round, it's like, oh my God, they drafted their quarterback.
Yeah, I mean,
Trey's unique because they traded so much for him.
Changing your quarterback causes the most disruption you can cause on a team. You don't want to do it. I mean, you don't want to have to change any position, right? But that to Golick, I'd say, like, part of the deal is it's the last position you ever want to change, because it's almost like changing coaches, right? In some ways, if your quarterback is smart enough to run an offense, like most of the good ones really are. So it just is different. In the same way you couldn't do QB tiers with running back tiers, and Sando wouldn't get as many clicks on linebacker tiers or nose tackle tiers or QB or cornerback tiers.
Because after like 6 guys, you wouldn't even know who the nose tackle was.
Well, that's part of it. Be like,
who's the best guards in the league? You're like, that dude from the Colts that was drafted really high.
Passionate debate. Tier 3 guards. So,
well, what would be the tiers that you would get the most reaction, right? Quarterbacks and coaches.
Yeah. And the other thing, in college,
honestly, Sando might be leaving a little something on the table. You should do coach tiers, shouldn't you?
Coach tiers. I think that in college it might even get more like what you're talking about, the other element that the NFL has that college doesn't have, right? Players know another guy's going to move on because they know he's had a great year. Their salary cap situation is what it is. It's time for him to get paid. In the same way, I wonder if guys who played with, Jordan Addison at Pitt by the end of the year are like, well, I mean, in 5 years, there's going to be no doubt. Like if you're on a lesser team that doesn't have as much financial wherewithal and a player has a breakout year, has a big game against Ohio State, whatever, that guy could leave because the NIL money is going to be bigger somewhere else. It's only going to get more like pro football and college for guys seeing the rotating door in their locker room next to them.
That's a pretty good project for like the GMs and DPPs of college programs and division and like Power 5. Keep an eye on the smaller schools against the big boys in September. Guys with huge games, make a note and reach out legally.
Yeah,
which you can't, but find a way.
In 5 years, as Khalil Mack has a good year against Ohio State, just transfers the next week, eligible to play immediately.
Can you transfer in season?
I mean, I said 5 years. Depends where they collectively bargain, the players.
That's true.
So, I mean, you can transfer as many times as you want coming up. So, but I do think there is.
Trey would have been an example. Like if the COVID thing hadn't happened and Trey Lance existed right now, does he last at North Dakota State the whole time? Or is all of a sudden he's like the starting quarterback at Arizona State?
Yeah, only if he really, really wants to be at North Dakota State. That's the only way. But
which is not as crazy. That's the one program where it's like you can get drafted in the top 2, right?
Yeah. But, Washington State's quarterback this year played at Incarnate Word last year, which is much lesser known than North Dakota State, right? You'd go, well, if North Dakota State had a great quarterback, people will find him. But will people find a great quarterback at Division II Incarnate Word? And the answer is yeah, apparently.
Yeah. Much easier on the internet.
They're on the hunt. So, I think it's been obvious this is where it's been headed for quite a while. Kyle's saying it on the day that everybody reports, kind of like on the first day of school, everything has changed here. I think starts things off on a certain foot. There's going to be no hesitation from anybody about saying Trey Lance is the quarterback and talking about the team like Trey is the quarterback.
Well, did you think that they looked a little worn out for day one? Because
I did. I'm surprised. Unless Kyle's going to keep his hair longer this year, he didn't. Usually he's got a fresh cut. Maybe they've been working for a week already. When do you think they showed up to the office?
Yeah, I'd say 5-6 days ago.
They've been talking Debo. Those conversations have been happening.
But the difference of a fresh cut is like when you work in the NFL, that guy comes to you. That guy can come next, 2 days. Like he can get his haircut whenever.
Yeah, it looks like Kyle hasn't had a haircut for a month. Actually,
yeah, probably hasn't. To me, their stress level. What would the thing that would stress them out the most? It would just be the situation with Jimmy getting the finality of it, because they did look for us again. It's literally day one, at least for us. I mean, for them, they've been getting things ready. They didn't just get off. John Lynch didn't land from Aruba yesterday, and Kyle land from Lake Tahoe, wherever the hell he was. But like they didn't look normally of like part of it is a football coach. You're not happy. Kyle's not happy-go-lucky all the time. But you saw it on John. Like there still is an elephant in the room that is a pretty big deal for them. And I don't necessarily think that's Debo. It's the majority of the questions, and rightfully so, were about the quarterback situation. And even once they kind of put their stamp, or Kyle specifically did, on Trey, the Jimmy situation still got asked about a lot. Like it's not over. It's not ending. And I wonder if you're John, like this is going to be a thing that I'm dealing with constantly, dealing with Don Yee, dealing with these other teams. Like ultimately Trey is getting all the reps. He's playing football. But the Jimmy situation is just still there. And it looked like they were wearing that kind of in their body language.
Yeah, I mean, if you kind of go through what the stresses would be, will he pass as we record this? He's going to get his physical this afternoon. So by the time you're listening to this or as we're live, we don't know the results, but they're holding their breath that he passes his physical for them today, right? That's part of it. I would imagine that's one of their stresses.
How many quarterbacks in the league that are like top 40 quarterbacks are in his situation where it's like, is he ready to go? It doesn't feel like there's any, right? Like going through Sando's list, like all these guys are practice. All these guys are like full go.
Yeah. I mean, Deshaun Watson, maybe it's a different conversation, but
yeah, but I'm saying like none of these guys are coming off injuries. Every single guy in the league is healthy, right? There's no like, well, there's one quarterback situation. A couple of these guys are injured. Like they're all healthy.
Right.
at least that we know about. I mean, maybe information, something happened over the summer, but so far.
Well, and by the way, when are you not healthy at the beginning of camp unless you're coming off like an Achilles, an ACL, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. None of these guys are injured, coming off injuries.
But I'm just saying, even in July, when are guys they're major, like usually not like a shoulder surgery. Now, maybe part of it is most guys aren't playing into late January and then getting surgery, but it's just for his particular injury. Oh, that's right. Joe Burrow.
Appendicitis.
His appendix out. Yeah. So
but to me, like, why I don't even bring that up is Jimmy's not going to the Bengals, right? And that's you get an appendix taken out. Like, is that what it was? Appendicitis?
Yeah, his appendix is coming out. So it's, I think doctor can tell you ahead of time, like he'll be back in it's a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
Eating ice cream. Right.
Whenever I see like a headline like Joe Burrow to miss time, like, oh my God, did something bad happen? And then it was like appendicitis. I'm like, oh, give me a break.
So then the other stress would be once he passes the physical, finding a trade for him. Now, like we can get into how they handle this situation, but there's no debate about where they are today. The situation has backfired. Like, this is not where they wanted to be today. This is not the way they wanted this thing to go. They said I don't know how many. I mean, Jimmy had surgery a long time ago, February, and several times today it was mentioned by them. Well, if he hadn't had to have the surgery, well, he did have to have the surgery, and here we are. And I think part of the nervousness has to be they believe very firmly, and the quarterback tiers reflect it. Jimmy Garoppolo, 16 on Mike Sando's QB list. That a quarterback of this guy's level, it would be malpractice to release a player of this level. But right now, they are in a race against time and hope that maybe somebody else has a need, that they don't end up walking away with nothing in return for Jimmy Garoppolo. And until they find a way to trade him, that is wearing on them. The irony is, if one day they release him, it'll be over and done with, and they'll just move on. But I think they're just really married to the idea that you don't get rid of players of this quality at this position without compensation.
Which I think is kind of crazy at this point in time. I would say typically cutting a player when you don't have any other options is insane. Unless he does something really bad, right? Off the field, which becomes a no-brainer. As the Niners have done before with Reuben Foster, and the Raiders did with Damon Arnett, who's back in prison or behind bars for cocaine. He's got some.
Is that an L for the Raiders or a win for the Raiders?
I'm saying that's a pretty big L. Especially, okay. I'm pretty sure that was one of the picks that the Daryl Morey and the Sloan Conference gave the Raiders all that credit for the Khalil Mack trade. It's like, well, they look at all this compensation. Well, yeah, they drafted one guy who's in jail and another guy who didn't get his fifth-year option pickup. I'm going to go with an L on that one, but that's another conversation.
Harsh grader.
Ultimately, I do not think at this time, especially given it'd be one thing. Well, it's like they couldn't wheel and deal. It happens a lot in basketball. Like, you got to find a market. Like, there is no market to be found. That's my thing. Like, there aren't 7 teams that need quarterback. We've talked before. Literally every team could just go with their quarterback right now. It doesn't mean it's going to be good, but like, Jimmy isn't a necessity for any team in the league. Not one. Now, maybe that changes a little bit. I thought Deshaun Watson's the news was going to come out 3 weeks ago. I mean, if you told me that news comes out September 1st, I'll believe you at this point. But I think they would tell you, we do have a guy who has started a ton of games, and our team's good enough, like, he can be our starter. Now, I think we'd all disagree with that, but I think they could look you in the face and be like, this guy started, let's say, 25 games. Like, this guy is not like a 2-time starter. So I do not agree that you can't cut him. I just don't. I actually think if by the time if he passes a physical and is ready to go, instead of like sending him away, I would release him. And if I'm Jimmy, I would demand to be released. I'm not throwing to your trainer. Like, if I'm physically ready to go, the season is not that far away. I need to stay in shape. And whether that's going somewhere to compete for the starting job, at least I get the reps, right? I don't get better. Iron sharpens iron. I don't get better just throwing with some trainers and, some random, Danny Gray when he gets hurt, inevitably. It might not. But I think if you're Jimmy,
Theragun on the quad last week.
I think if you're Jimmy, you cannot be cool with potentially like, hey, we might ride this out for the the spring. You're not going to get any reps, though, because we got to get, obviously, Trey ready and figure out who our backup quarterback is going to be. Well, like, I'm not going to sit on the side and just be cool with that. We're all cool. We all like each other. This is like the most cordial breakup we've ever seen of divorces in the history of divorces. Personally, professionally, it's crazy how kind of smooth this thing has gone. Been a couple, hiccups, but for the most part, even today, it felt like, hell, maybe they were lying. Could it have been a little weird with Jimmy this morning? Is that why they look kind of, especially John, looked a little flustered? Could Jimmy have said, like, listen, guys, when I pass, you either need to trade me or I got to go. Like, I'm not cool with sitting. I'm a good guy. I'm not going to fucking be a malcontent, like, throw things at, like, Kinlaw attack Grant Cohn on the sideline. You can argue that was a little justified, but that's another conversation as well. But the point is, like, you can't just hold me hostage here. That's fucked up because you don't need to hold. What are you holding me hostage for?
You make a great argument, but at the end of the day, they have no obligation to grant Jimmy Garoppolo his release, right? Just because he demands it.
But ultimately, where it would be pretty fucked up is if no one shatters an ankle, Teddy Bridgewater, or knee fall off, and you just end up cutting him.
I know, but that's part of what they're waiting for. And I think if that happened, he would find a home, but it would derail the start of his season or the potential for him to be a starting NFL quarterback week 1. But I think they've waited this long. Now the difference is they've waited partly this long. Once he's healthy, they can save the money once they cut him, right? You don't want to cut him hurt because then it costs you a lot of money. But one of them, John or Kyle today, one of them made a comment again about his value and the player of his quality. And so
the value is based on what someone else is willing to pay.
Well, 100%. But they believe that they as an organ, they're going to do what's best for the team. And to me, clearly what's best for the team, from their perspective, is to wait as long as possible and either hope that somebody gets hurt, hope that Donnie's able to find them some deal where the Texans go, we don't love Davis Mills as much, or the Seahawks say we don't love Drew Lock as much. If you guys are willing to pay.
Donnie's had a long time to broker a deal here.
Well, I know, but there's a lot of things that you do just have to wait. Like the Seahawks do have to just see what they got, right? Or somebody gets hurt, whatever the case is. I think it would be a change in their course of action if they then just released him without waiting out a few more weeks of camp to see if somebody gets hurt.
I would agree.
Change in their action.
As of today, right? Every team in the league reported Niner style, right? Even the teams that hadn't yet showed up.
Yep, all the veterans have shown up by today.
In the entire NFL.
In the entire league.
So by tomorrow, every team will have started practice. So I would say in like less than 14 days, let's use like 10, you will have, give or take, I mean, some teams will have more, but like 9 practices under your belt to just Drew Lock, Geno Smith, some Davis Mills things. Has he gotten better?
Yeah.
Like that. I don't think like they would like to, Jimmy would like to. I would say within 10 to 14 days, that's kind of the goal.
I agree with you.
Because then you're right. Because even Don would be like, hey, this team say they might be interested. They just need a little time to evaluate, right? And for the next, if every team starts practice tomorrow and the rules are all universally the same, up until Sunday will be a huge day around the league, right? When no one's practicing. The Raiders might, because their time and the Jags timeline is a little different, but the majority of the teams that
started today
will probably be off Sunday.
Is the CBA negotiated day off?
And usually, in my experience on that situation, the day off is a huge like rest day for the players, right? They're all getting their whatever. Coaches and personnel meet. They meet. And they kind of do like you start going around. You remember when Hard Knocks used to be cool and there used to be a camera in the room with like all the coaches and the scouts and everyone was talking shit? We lost that about a decade ago. That still happens, but that's a day like, hey, we don't feel great. And you could argue the quarterback situation is like the top of the food chain, like the GM and the head coach and the OC and like the number 2 GM is like they're talking and the owner are talking about that nonstop every day, right? It's not one of those like, how's our 4-string running backs? What do you think right on the line? Who's going to make the team? Like the quarterback thing's a pretty big deal. So you could argue that comes to fruition in terms of evaluate. You could might be 4 days in and be like, this might be a problem, right?
Yeah.
I would say that's probably not the case with Davis Mills.
I would agree with that.
More likely in Seattle
I mean, he does have a new coach, right? The organization is the same.
Seattle and the Giants. Like, what if Daboll's like, this guy, I'm not that into him.
That wouldn't happen in Miami, right?
I think they just drafted him so high. You got to just give him a shot.
I wonder if that's part of John Lynch. You know, we were talking before Mark Sessler from NFL.com tweeted, just watch John Lynch's body language. And you and I agree, like John Lynch always he's always fidgety when he's at the podium, almost always fidgety. I think my theory is that like part of the job requires you to not be totally truthful with people. And that's not his inherent nature. We talked to him on the sidelines during OTAs. We brought up players. He talked about players, right? He said things about players when we talked to him, just kind of casually.
Trusted us.
He trusted us. Yeah.
No, we did give him some wine. You know,
we got to send Shanahan next time. We have to send him something.
Well, I'd never even heard about it until he told Kawakami when he was eating at French Laundry.
So I do wonder if part of him as a former player does not like the position that he's putting Jimmy Garoppolo in, that he feels obligated as the general manager of the 49ers to put Jimmy Garoppolo in.
It's a fucked up situation.
Jimmy said to them, guys, like, this is my career. And John Lynch's reaction was probably like, you know what, man? I know. I'm sorry, but I'm the GM of the 49ers. I wonder if that weighs on him.
Yeah, I would doubt if that's what Jimmy said, that would be his reaction. Like, I'm doing everything I can. I'm trying. Kyle's like, and then Jimmy's side-eyeing Kyle, like, whatever he's saying. Kyle's a better liar.